Hi, I'm Gabe from Unsolicited Designs, and welcome to Report Cards, a series where I grade every mythic from the set based on how unique they are, what they can do beyond a regular rare, and the creative deck building opportunities they provide. In this video, I'll be taking you on a tour of the marvelous mythic rooms of the House of Duskmourn. I hope I'll learn to like and subscribe for me by the end of the video, and I'd love to hear what you think about these cards and my analysis of them. Without further ado, on to the review. Let's begin our tour, and what better place to start than through the front door. Charred Foyer. For 1 red and 3 generic, you get an enchantment, Room. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library. You may play it this turn. As we'll see, rooms have 2 halves, and you can cast either one first. That door unlocks on the battlefield. As a sorcery, you may pay the mana cost of a locked door to unlock it. The first half of this card is a hallmark of red enchantments now. There's nothing fresh going on here, unfortunately, though I'm glad to see this lets you play both spells and lands that you find off the top, as not all versions of this effect have done so historically. So let's move along up the stairs. Just mind your step. It tends to get a bit confusing here in the warped space. For 2 red and 4 generic, once each turn, you may pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for a spell you cast from exile. I love this ability, and I think it's a perfect complement to the Foyer half of this card, clearly. But beyond that, it fits beautifully with one of Red's signature forms of card advantage, Impulse Card Draw, where instead of cards going into your hand, they're exiled instead, and you have that turn or the next to use them. That makes this design totally cohesive with itself, but also the color red as a whole, encouraging you to dig through the many options available to you and see what combinations you can find. This design does have a few similar cards it compares to, somewhat favorably to fellow Mythic 1 with the Multiverse, since Warp Space is cheaper and is reasonably similar in function, but perhaps less favorably when compared to Tlenkali Hunter, which is only a rare. Yes, Warp Space is more open-ended, a source of card advantage, and more powerful, but it's close. That and the fact that Charred Foyer is also a fairly rehashed concept leaves me wanting just a little bit more. Still, this design is 2 good halves that make a great whole, and I'm excited to see Red lean further into playing in the exile space of the game. So I'll give Charred Foyer, Warped Space, an A. An important feature of any home is storage, and if you love having space for your clothes and your kicks, you'll love this walk-in closet. For 1 green and 2 generic, you get an enchantment room that says, you may play land cards from your graveyard. Here's an effect that's been printed 3 times in the last 4 years. 4 times if you include Undergrowth Recon. On its own, this is essentially no longer a mythic effect. Even so, I believe it is an incredibly valuable one, and its stock will only continue to rise as more and more useful lands are printed. And let's not overlook the spacious basement. Forgotten Cellar. For 2 green and 3 generic, when you unlock this door, you may cast spells from your graveyard this turn, and if a card we put into your graveyard from anywhere this turn, exile it instead. This effect has only appeared a few times in Magic's history, so it has a lot of nostalgic value attached to it. When it was first designed, it made a lot of waves with the ability to play out all of your rituals a second time to generate loads of mana and a large spell count, so you could combo your opponents to death. The power level of Standard isn't that out of control these days, and it seems the designers feel comfortable releasing this effect at just 2 additional mana. That certainly makes this harder to take advantage of in any format, since you'll have less mana available to cast whatever goodies are in your graveyard. In that sense, a lot of players may prefer to stick with cheaper effects that they're used to, similarly costed effects that have some additional upside, or just go over the top and get most of your graveyard back for future use. Also worth considering is that this effect comes with a very real downside if your deck values certain things, specifically death triggers. The turn you open the door to the cellar, anything that would go into your graveyard gets exiled instead. That means any creatures of yours that fall in battle get sacrificed or simply removed by your opponents. So keep that in mind when you activate this effect. All said, I love both of these abilities, and they carry a lot of weight from Magic's halcyon days. But it's quite fascinating to evaluate them under the modern-day Mythic microscope. I find each of them somewhat lacking, but they provide a lot of value as a package, so perhaps I'm biased as a longtime player, but I'm giving Walk-In Closet, Forgotten Cellar, a B. I can tell you're looking for a house to pursue your hobbies. and a crafty person such as yourself will certainly make use of Dollmaker's Shop. For 1 white and 1 generic, you get an enchantment room that says, whenever one or more non-toy creatures you control attack a player, create a 1/1 white toy artifact creature token. I've spent a lot of time discussing attack triggers that create tokens, like Threefold Thunderhulk in my Gabe's Faves for Lost Caverns of Ixalan, and Warren Warleader in my report cards and unredesigns for Bloomborough. This card pushes that concept into some new territory, both in that this effect only costs 2 mana, and it's on a new card type. Of course, the token created by Dollmaker Shop isn't attacking, but that's a balanced exchange for this costing 2 mana instead of 3 or more. Importantly, this can create multiple toy tokens a turn, provided that you attack each opponent with at least 1 creature. I also like that the tokens are artifacts. It may not matter for your strategy in most decks you include Dollmaker Shop in, but I imagine there are a lot of scenarios where generating multiple free artifacts per turn for only a 2 mana down payment is quite valuable. And once you've perfected your crafts, you'll want to display them for all your guests to see. Porcelain Gallery. For 2 white and 4 generic, creatures you control have base power and toughness, each equal to the number of creatures you control. We've seen some cards that give your creatures a defined stat line before, though they're typically only temporary, intended as a curse of sorts, conditional on some other factor, or basically just making them all copies of one particular creature. So this is breaking some new ground as near as I can tell. I love that it gives your creatures a scaling power and toughness. The more creatures you have, the stronger they are. Variability is a quality that makes for a terrific mythic design. Porcelain Gallery allows you to make an army as tall as it is wide, with 5 5/5s, or 100 100 100s. Shoot for the moon. Of course, it could also backfire on you, meaning your lonely 5/5 is now a lowly 1/1. But I think potential drawbacks like this should be a more regular part of card designs, to give players something to build around, and also offer a little more reward because of the risk. The Dollmaker half of this card gives us a familiar ability, but with a variation suitable to make it mythic. And Porcelain Gallery offers a unique ability that players can take advantage of in their own creative ways. All of that while showcasing the brand new room mechanic. Porcelain may be delicate, but Dollmaker's Shop, Porcelain Gallery, makes a strong case for the S tier. If you're looking for a space for some quiet contemplation, you'll simply die when you see the Funeral Room. For 1 black and 2 generic, you get an enchantment room that says, whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life, and you gain 1 life. This first half of the card isn't anything new at all. In fact, it's strictly worse than an uncommon. So that's kind of a major knock against it to start off. Though I do want to note that black is really hitting a critical mass of this effect at 3 mana or less. But let's not let all that get you down. Envision the celebrations you'll have in the Awakening Hall. For 2 black and 6 generic, when you unlock this door, return all creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. There are only so many effects that put all creatures from your graveyard, or all graveyards, directly onto the battlefield, and they usually take time to build up to, or have some sort of caveat. So Awakening Hall is a fantastic effect that I'm glad to see more of, and with no strings attached. You can lead into it by casting Funeral Room first, trade off and sacrifice loads of creatures in the meantime, draining all your opponents as you go, then maybe find a cheap, creature-centric way to wipe the board, at instant speed if possible, and run it all back with the Awakening Hall. I would have liked to see some innovation with the Funeral Room half, perhaps letting it trigger off milling effects where your creatures can wind up in the graveyard without dying. So because both sides are powerful, but not really innovative, I'm going to have to cap the grade for Funeral Room Awakening Hall at a B. And this last room is a lovely place for some self-reflection. Mirror Room. For 1 blue and 2 generic, you get an enchantment room that says, when you unlock this door, create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, except it's a reflection in addition to its other creature types. Clone effects have become a regularly recurring feature of the uncommon slot, so seeing this text on a mythic rare doesn't move the needle very much. Sure, it only costs 3 mana instead of 4, but at higher mana values, they tend to include some additional perks. And it might have been an opportunity to explore this space further and see what a mythic clone could offer. The second half of this card really shatters the ceiling. Fractured Realm. For 2 blue and 5 generic, if a triggered ability of a permanent you control triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. Copying triggered abilities is a sensational offering, and well worthy of being mythic. I really like how we recently saw a mythic that copies your activated abilities, and this card picks up on that design space to see where else it can lead. As for what triggered abilities you might want to copy, well, the options are just about endless. You could start with the first half of this card, Mirror Room, and get 2 copies. I like that as a pair, this room combination might encourage you to unlock either side first, depending on the circumstances. Other triggers that might be of interest are the crime cards from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. The text on these cards limits to them triggering only once per turn, but copying the trigger bypasses the restriction. There are plenty of other cards designed around triggering only once per turn, so see what looks fun to abuse. Personally, I'm liking the idea of getting extra triggers for shrines and sagas. This design combines 2 desirable effects, gives you some decision points about what order you want to use them, and offers limitless possibilities for you to take advantage of. That reflects nicely on this design, so I'm placing Mirror Hall, Fractured Realm in the S tier.
And that concludes our tour of the 5 mythic rooms of Duskmourn. Do my grades pass inspection, or should they be evicted? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. I hope I earned a like and subscribe from you, and I'd love it if you'd share this video. If not, I appreciate you hearing me out. You can follow me on X at UnsolicitedMTG for channel updates and other nonsense, and be sure to check back in next week when I go over my 5 favorite non-mythic cards from the set. Once again, I'm Gabe from Unsolicited Designs, and who asked me anyways?